unknown. Now I assume as an axiom that science is not a fairy tale. It is not engaged in decking out unknowable entities with arbitrary and fantastic properties. What then is it that science is doing, granting that it is effecting something of importance? My answer is that it is determining the character of things known, namely, the character of apparent nature. But we may drop the term apparent, for there is but one nature, namely the nature which is before us in perceptual knowledge. The characters which science discerns in nature are subtle characters, not obvious at first sight. They are relations of relations and characters of characters. But for all their subtlety, they are stamped with a certain simplicity which makes their consideration essential in unravelling the complex relations between characters of more perceptive insistence. The fact that the bifurcation of nature into causal and apparent components does not express what we mean by our knowledge is brought before us when we realise our thoughts in any discussion of the causes of our perceptions. For example, the fire is burning and we see a red coal. This is explained in science by radiant energy from the coal entering our eyes. But in seeking for such an explanation, we are not asking what are the sort of occurrences which are fitted to cause a mind to see red. The chain of causation is entirely different. The mind is cut out altogether. The real question is, when red is found in nature, what else is found there also? Namely, we are asking for an analysis of the accompaniments in nature of the discovery of red in nature. In a subsequent lecture I shall expand this line of thought. I simply draw attention to it here in order to point out that the wave theory of light has not been adopted because waves are just the sort of things which ought to make a mind perceive colours. There is no part of the evidence which has ever been adduced for the wave theory, yet on the causal theory of perception it is really the only relevant part. In other words, science is not discussing the causes of knowledge, but the coherence of knowledge. The understanding which is sought by science is an understanding of relations within nature. So far I have discussed the bifurcation of nature in connection with the theories of absolute time and of absolute space. My reason has been that the introduction of the relational theories only weakens the case for bifurcation, and I wished to discuss this case on its strongest grounds. For instance, suppose we adopt the relational theory of space. Then the space in which apparent nature is set is the expression of certain relations between the apparent objects. It is a set of apparent relations between apparent relata. Apparent nature is the dream, and the apparent relations of space are dream relations, and the space is the dream space. Similarly, the space in which causal nature is set is the expression of certain relations between the causal objects. It is the expression of certain facts about the causal activity which is going on behind the scenes. Accordingly, causal space belongs to a different order of reality to apparent space. Hence there is no point-wise connection between the two, and it is meaningless to say that the molecules of the grass are in any place which has a determinate spatial relation to the place occupied by the grass which we see. The conclusion is very paradoxical and makes nonsense of all scientific phraseology. The case is even worse if we admit the relativity of time. For the same arguments apply, and break up time into the dream time and causal time, which belong to different orders of reality. I have, however, been discussing an extreme form of the bifurcation theory. It is, as I think, the most defensible form, but its very definiteness makes it the more evidently obnoxious to criticism. The intermediate form allows that the nature we are discussing is always the nature directly known, and so far it rejects the bifurcation theory. But it holds that there are psychic additions to nature as thus known, and that these additions are in no proper sense part of nature. For example, if we perceive the red billiard ball at its proper time, in its proper place, with its proper motion, with its proper hardness, and with its proper inertia, but its redness and its warmth and the sound of the click as a cannon is made off it are psychic additions, namely secondary qualities which are only the mind's way of perceiving nature. This is not only the vaguely prevalent theory, but is, I believe, the historical form of the bifurcation theory, in so far as it is derived from philosophy. I shall call it the theory of psychic additions. This theory of psychic additions is a sound common sense theory which lays immense stress on the obvious reality of time, space, solidity, and inertia, but distrusts the minor artistic additions of colour, warmth, and sound. The theory is the outcome of common sense in retreat. It arose in an epoch when the transmission theories of science were being elaborated. For example, colour is the result of a transmission from the material object to the perceiver's eye, and what is thus transmitted is not colour. Thus colour is not part of the reality of the material object. Similarly, for the same reason, sounds evaporate from nature. Also, warmth is due to the transfer of something which is not temperature. Thus we are left with spatio-temporal positions, and what I may term the pushiness of the body. This lands us to 18th and 19th century materialism, namely, the belief that what is real in nature is matter, in time and space and with inertia. Evidently, a distinction in quality has been presupposed, separating off some perceptions due to touch from other perceptions. These touch perceptions are perceptions of the real inertia, whereas the other perceptions are psychic additions which must be explained on the causal theory. This distinction is the product of an epoch in which physical science has got ahead of medical pathology and of physiology. Perceptions of push are just as much the outcome of transmission as are perceptions of colour. When colour is perceived, the nerves of the body are excited in one way and transmit their message towards the brain, and when push is perceived, other nerves of the body are excited in another way and transmit their message towards the brain. The message of the one set is not the conveyance of colour, and the message of the other set is not the conveyance of push. But in one case colour is perceived, and in the other case the push, due to the object. If you snip certain nerves, there is an end to the perception of colour, and if you snip certain other nerves, there is an end to the perception of push. It would appear, therefore, that any reasons which should remove colour from the reality of nature should also operate to remove inertia. Thus the attempted bifurcation of apparent nature into two parts, of which one part is both causal for its own appearance and for the appearance of the other part, which is purely apparent, fails, owing to the failure to establish any fundamental distinction between our ways of knowing about the two parts of nature as thus partitioned. I am not denying that the feeling of muscular effort historically led to the formulation of the concept of force. But this historical fact does not warrant us in assigning a superior reality in nature to material inertia over colour or sound. So far as reality is concerned, all our sense perceptions are in the same boat and must be treated on the same principle. The evenness of treatment is exactly what this compromise theory fails to achieve. The bifurcation theory, however, dies hard. The reason is that there really is a difficulty to be faced in relating within the same system of entities the redness of the fire with the agitation of the molecules. In another lecture I will give my own explanation of the origin of the difficulty and of its solution. Another favourite solution, the most attenuated form which the bifurcation theory assumes, is to maintain that the molecules and ether of science are purely conceptual. Thus there is but one nature.